Okay. So my background is I've got a PhD in forensics and was tracking paedophile activity on the internet. I set up the first UK Internet Safety Centre. I've been in internet safety for 2 decades, oh my goodness. And I was Chief Security Officer of Bebo, a social networking platform, and was responsible for developing the policies and procedures and mechanisms whereby we dealt with all of the abuse management reports that we received. I'm the author of the PAS 1 to 96 Age Checking Code of Practice, which is relevant to the Digital Economy Bill and will be published soon by the British Standards Institution. I'm also a tech entrepreneur and a digital rights activist, specifically for children, focused on that. So the 5 key takeaways, I thought I'd put these up at this juncture. I want to look at the challenges of existing ways in which mental health issues are addressed on social media platforms. Right? It is very, and let me preface that and caveat that to say it is very difficult to manage when you've got millions of users, and there are a whole raft of issues. There's pro-anorexia, pro-bulimia, pro-suicide, and the list is endless. And then talk about the scope to introduce more effective mental health triage systems. And the previous speakers mentioned about triage. How do you make sure this person that has, there may be comorbidity of issues that they're trying to deal with, how do you manage that? How do you direct them to the right level of support? And the previous speakers also spoke about that there are some kids who are just not going to speak to their parents. This is just not, because of there may be violence in the home, there may be a whole raft of issues. So those children need extra protection. There are regulatory drivers that has the potential to transform mental health service provision, and these have huge advantages for businesses, right? And the growing importance of technical standards, these have been addressed this morning. The gentleman from PwC around security standards, policies as metadata in catalyzing tech innovation. And this is really important. How many people here are familiar with the Kantara consent receipt specification? The UMA, user managed access. Okay, so there's a whole raft of tech innovation that is gathering pace and will change how we transact online. The identity as a service industry is expected to reach 1.5 trillion by 2020, right? Again, so, and this is, it was mentioned this morning, the Equifax issue, that whole debacle about storing massive amounts of data. The IDaaS industry is going to change the way in which we do that by tokenizing a lot of the information. So the Age Checking Code of Practice says when you present yourself to an adult site, all they need to know is that this person's over 18. Similarly, if you want to use on Instagram, the ability to assert, look, I'm in this age group, I just want people in the same age group to contact me. That's a tech innovation that's coming, and it will change how we transact online. So the role of the IGF, facilitate discussion of public policy issues pertaining to mental health, right? Because there's nobody championing this at the moment. There's a kind of complacency of like, oh, it's a bit too hard, so what will we do, right? These are just a few slides to show that like 79% of kids are on Snapchat. 80% of children lie about their age to go on these social media platforms. So the COPPA legislation in the US, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, says you must be 13. There's 8, 9, 10-year-olds on there. They love it, absolutely. And these are the things that they're doing. What are they doing? They're basically growing up online. They are exchanging every single aspect of their lives online, right? Now, when you ask, this mirrors boys as well, 58% of kids aged between 13 to 21 are worried about mental health issues. 58%. And 37% are worrying about bullying or trolling on social media because they experience it. There's body shaming, oh, you're too fat, you're too ugly. You know, there's a whole raft of horrible stuff that goes on. 19% are worried about staying safe online. And then here you have, there's a stigma around mental health illness. It still would feel, if I said to you, I suffer from bipolar depression, it'd be like, oh God. There's an automatic response. I don't, but it doesn't, but we kind of recoil from it. And that's why there's 42% of people aged between 18 and 24 say they don't feel comfortable just coming out with something like that because of the reaction that they're going to get. So If you're on a Facebook page, now I'm not saying anything bad about Facebook, I'm using them as an illustrative example. As I said, it's very, very difficult to manage the deluge of reports that you get and to try and figure out, how do I manage this effectively? So say you go onto a profile and you see somebody who looks like they're having a really difficult time, and you think, I better report this profile, her Facebook profile. Facebook will say, tell us what's happening, what's going on here. And I say, I want to help Annie, right? Remember now, it could be 8, it could be 10, it could be 18, it could be older. What's happening with Annie? She's being bullied or harassed. The advice? Well, send Annie a nice little message. Get help for Annie, or learn how to support Annie. I'll come back to the third one here, right? There's almost a getting rid of the responsibility. The platform is saying, you sort it out. It's good that you were interested, so off you go, sort that out. The next thing then, what happens if I think, Annie's about to commit suicide, right? She may be in danger of hurting herself. What do I get told then? If your friend is in immediate danger, call the emergency services, offer help or support, right? Contact a friend, because I might need help. And then they suggest, you should send this message to Annie. It's pre-filled out. And the tip, write a note to Annie in your own words to help her resolve the issue, right? Imagine you're 10 and something desperate happens then afterwards. Where's the burden of guilt? It's a diffusion of responsibility, and it's questionable. Again, maybe there's research behind this, or whatever. Here's another one. So this little girl, or this girl said, actually she's a mum, I feel suicidal. So you go across, sorry, the animation didn't go in here properly. So help us understand, where I've underlined in red, right? I want to report that she's going to commit suicide. The only option that will take me through the rest of this is, I don't think it should be on Facebook. I don't think somebody's cry for help should be on Facebook. I don't think. So what is that telling you? And then the next step is over here. What's wrong with this is threatening, violent, or suicide. And then you get to the next thing. It's self-injury or suicide. And then they'll say, offer support, contact a friend, ask us to look at this post, right? So that's how bullying and suicide is managed on Facebook and similar platforms. And this is probably the better of them. There's a diffusion of responsibilities, pushing it back on the kids and saying, good luck with that. Oh, I animated the arrows. Now, a couple of years ago when I was Chief Security Officer with Bebo, I was aware of these problems and thought, hang on a second, this is rubbish. We can't have a situation like this where we have abuse management teams. And it's the same, Bebo's abuse management team were based in Austin in Texas. Other teams are based for Facebook, Vietnam and other places. There are people who are not trained professionals manning the reports of abuse. They're on minimum wage, right? They don't have the skill set to direct people. The people that do are the mental health organizations, right? So I spent 3 years working with a number of mental health organizations, including the Tavistock Portman NHS Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Unit, saying, listen, there must be a better way we can do this. Can we change our tech? Well, can we get the engineers to change the tech in such a way that we can facilitate people asking for help earlier, right? So when you do feel a bit blue, or you're feeling this person is harassing me, or whatever it is that's on your mind, that you can get access to the appropriate support from actual professionals. So we sat down with a load of mental health organizations. Initially, the response was like, we don't want to do this. This could be damaging to our brands. This is not where we want to be. We're concerned about how you secure informed consent. What about the data protection issues? How do we make sure that in a crisis situation that person gets a welfare check? How will that whole dynamic, how will that work? And we don't want to go in the front line of this, and basically you're a commercial company, so it's really your issue. But with a lot of persuasion, we convinced them to get involved and say that we could develop a set of good practice guidelines about how you deliver those services online. The Bebo engineers changed, so when we were working with BEAT, the eating disorder group, they had a profile page. We re-engineered those pages so that if I wanted to post something and said, I'm binging, or I'm whatever it is that I'm doing, it wouldn't show my name or my profile, but I'd know it was my message, and I could get help directly there and then. At the back end, if there was a risk to life situation, we would implement a policy whereby we'd contact law enforcement, give them the information, and that was an MOU that we did with the Tech Police unit in the Met Police. So it is possible to use technology to protect children, and anybody who tells you differently is not thinking things through properly. So you can do risk management. This was all based on the NHS triage and risk management processes. You can access this online. So we developed triage and care pathways, working to understand how we would direct people to the right type of support in a timely manner and give them the backup that they need. So the guidance is for platform providers, mental health providers, and we addressed all of the issues that had been barriers to the mental health organizations, right? Say, tell us why you won't do this, and let us get some good practice guidelines in there. So you mitigate the liability to the organizations, and you optimize the outputs and the positive outcomes for people. And you do have to have research underpinning that, but that requires industry to have a commitment to do that, and nobody is pushing them to do that right now. Nobody is pushing them. It's just like, oh, it's just one of those things, kids have a tough time. It's like, really? Is that you know? Now, one of the massive drivers for this is the General Data Protection Regulation, and we were talking about children's rights, one of the speakers, or one of the audience. The General Data Protection Regulation, Article 8 says that if you're going to process data of kids under the age of 13, you need to get parental consent. And also, Matt Hancock mentioned this morning that the AVMSD, the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, and the people that are pulling that legislation together are looking at what the UK has done in the Digital Economy Bill, which requires any adult content provider to age check before they afford access to content. The adult content providers are happy to do this. Some of the biggest websites that you know, 80% of the traffic on adult content that's going to them, they want to implement this. There are commercial reasons behind that, but you know, so it is possible to conduct a pseudonymous age check using an attribute exchange, whereby you know that this person is within this age group and therefore eligible to get access to stuff. Now, the GDPR gives young people additional digital rights: the right to be informed, the right of access to information they have about them, the right to erasure. So the shenanigans that you get up to when you're 14 or 15, maybe breaking into the vodka cabinet when your parents are out and taking photos, you know, those sorts of things can be hoovered up and can influence whether people get places in university and jobs, which is inherently unfair. So GDPR protects young people from those sorts of instances and gives them the right to data portability so that they can take their information elsewhere. And the right to erasure is really, really important to give you the sense of, I actually have a good start in life, and the stuff that was bothering me before isn't going to continue through my entire life. So there are fines because industry is incentivized more sharply when there are potential fines in terms of misusing young people's information. These are just some stats. Again, 96% of people are concerned about privacy. The BSI Online Age Checking Code of Practice will be published soon, and what that enables is a third-party service provider to check the assertion of an age against reliable and authoritative data sources. It stipulates all the due diligence that you need to do. And then from an industry perspective, that shifts the liability from Facebook or YouTube or whatever onto the third-party providers who were certified and have the right insurance to be able to do this. So a technical solution is on the verge, we're on the verge of it transforming how we transact online. And also, there are consent technologies out there that enable so that if you're going through a GDPR process, you need to know where all of your data is, you need to mark it, give privileged access, etc. And that needs to be signed by metadata or attached to metadata, which tells you that when this person says, I've had enough of being on here, I want you to give me a subject access request, I want you to give me all the information that you have about me, and I'd like to be able to move that information to somewhere else, and I need it all removed, or I revoke my permission to process data. Companies from now on must be able to do that, and the way to do that will be automated using consent and digital rights platforms and authorization. So when you have that capability, that transforms. It's a catalyst for tech innovation in terms of what these platforms can enable mental health service providers to do, and the end user, the person that's involved. So the bringing closer together the suppliers of mental health services with the people that actually need them via the platform that they are growing up on is becoming a more and more of a realistic possibility. But again, it's about pressure from a public policy perspective to get these parties to work to achieve this. And again, so I hope that was like a very speedy run through. So I hope that the challenges, the existing ways that mental health issues are handled could be improved, could try harder. If there was a report card, it would say could try harder. There are mechanisms and good practice guidelines out there that define how you could do it much more effectively. The regulatory drivers are in place, which means there's a giant stick to incentivize industry to take this more seriously. The plethora of technical standards and policies and metadata mean that there's a huge amount of scope for tech innovation around this. And the role of the IGF is really important, I think. Changes in policy can mean better mental health outcomes for all age groups, and making mental health services more accessible, reducing the stigma, legitimizing the whole thing of like when you are down, it is okay to ask for help, I think would be a tremendous boon in terms of what's on the horizon. So thank you, and I'd be delighted to take any questions. Oh, yeah.
Andrew Sterling, Larkhill. Thank you. Very interesting talk, Rachel.
Thank you.
I got your point about a need for skills to be applied appropriately and so on. I just wondered whether you saw the bigger companies perhaps filling some of the gaps that we see in the local services, because even the way issues are reported conventionally, for example at school, sometimes the school find that the local social team is not quite up to the job, don't have capacity or whatever. Police perhaps have missed things as well.
Yeah.
Do you see the mechanism as being simply a link to those services, or in some way the big platforms actually stepping in to fill some of these deficiencies?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think it's the platforms have almost like a duty of care. People are growing up on your platform. It's not, you don't just have a duty to advertise to them or to show them content or to feed specific things. You also have a duty of care. And in the experience of Bebo, for example, what that entailed was getting engineering time set aside so that they would look at how do we handle this and how do we manage the messages and how do we think about a triaging system and how do we work with people to make sure that care pathways are defined in policies so that this can be enabled. So it is much more an embedded, it's like a partnership, but I wish if I had another hand. It's a partnership between the platform providers and the end user and the mental health organizations. They have to come much closer together. And the benefits, the business benefits are huge because the amount of money that's spent on abuse management teams, if you look at Facebook's SEC filings in the US, they have a whole section on what they think are the risks to the business, which includes negative stories about mishandling abuse management situations. So so there are massive business benefits. So it's not as if it's like, oh, think of the kids, and it's saying you could optimize operationally your business. You could optimize these mechanisms, which would have a positive effect on your investment. So thank you.
Louise Bennett, Rachel, you were talking about triaging online. Do you find that the the processes you need to triage in mental health situations online are significantly different from the processes that exist offline? Have people got to go back to first principles and really think again about how they do that triaging?
Well, that's a really good question. There's a huge, just think about it, algorithmically you can help people because you've got a huge amount of data, and as long as they permission that. And remember, if you're using an attribute checking service, a third-party service to make sure that this person is eligible to access the service, all you know is the age band that they're in. And if you require additional attributes, whether they're male or female or whatever, you can do that on an attribute checking system. So you've built in data protection by design. And then there's a huge body of research out there that talks about how you can triage people. And that's why it was really important to do this work with the NHS Tavistock Centre to benefit from what they do in the offline world and to transpose that into an online world, tweak it slightly, and then you can actually measure outcomes. And it then becomes part of the counsellors and psychologists and psychiatrists. It can become part of their therapy in terms of working through stuff with young people. So oftentimes, particularly if counsellors, for example, some of them are not hugely tech savvy, let's say it that way, so they're counselling somebody, saying, how do you feel about this? How is your life? And almost the blind spot is the person's digital life, right? So you are ameliorating both online delivery of services and offline. And there is research always underpins these things to see how you can improve it.
Funding in mental health services overall, because eventually, presumably at some point, we have to get to a trained professional who's going to provide the care that's needed.
Yes, mental health the funding for mental health is abysmal. And there are some benefits, but you can mitigate, you can spread the costs. There are a lot of mental health organizations out there that can help in the early stages when people are, so you're helping people upstream in many instances. So you're stopping the flood of people who were, waiting for 6 weeks or 6 months and in the offline world for a CAMHS, child and adolescent mental health. They've been to the GP and it may be suicidal. There's a huge waiting list. But there are, so you can, it could have a positive effect in terms of taking the pressure off of the offline world by delivering it in a timely manner. Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.